Hello, I'm Di and welcome to Pep in Your Step Studio. Today we have a Parchment Craft tutorial featuring a floral design that will be made into a parchment pendant. So welcome along and thank you for joining me on the journey of this project. Today's project is this scraggly looking flower, probably partly inspired by sunflowers, but I hand drew it myself, so reality is it's probably not like any flower in nature, but that's the beauty of doing art and craft. It doesn't have to be perfect like nature does it. So I can see it through my parchment beautifully. I'm going to trace all of these petals by hand. Doesn't have to be perfect by any means. You can see that the petals go in every direction and they're a bit scraggly, so if I'm a bit off with my pencil tracing, it won't matter in the slightest. I'll work my way around here. One of my favourite flowers is the gerbera, and so I think that might be why flowers like this appeal to me, because they just remind me a little bit of gerberas. So we're just working our way around. This is a small project, so I'm happy to hold the parchment in place with my fingers. If it were larger, I would probably want to be sure that it didn't move, and that's when I would consider either using my magnetic board, or I could use some low tack adhesive sticky tape to just hold it in one or two places. It doesn't need much. I'm just going to lightly mark in where that circle centre is. Not important, because as you've seen in previous videos, I'll be taking this off. Lovely. All right, now how does that look? Looks fabulous. Looks like a very basic line drawing, as they all do. It's the beauty of parchment, is we always start with a basic line drawing, so anyone is capable of designing their own patterns when it comes to parchment craft. A lot of these petals have got some pointy tips on them, so I'm going to use my smallest embossing tool that I have and not push too hard, because I do not want to push it through the parchment. And I'm really just getting those tips down, those petals. I can turn the picture to suit. Oops, see, I just missed the pencil line there by about 1 millimetre. Doesn't matter. No one's going to know except you and me. So keep going. I will do, even though this part here isn't the tip of the petal, it's quite exposed there, and I will want light hitting that just to highlight it. If I didn't put much embossing on it, it would potentially just disappear and make that petal that it's actually a part of look like it's just hanging there from nowhere. If I flip it over, I can check that I've done every petal tip, and I have. So I'm happy with that. Because I have only really embossed quite out on the tips here, if I remove the pencil now, I suspect I'll be in trouble. I'll forget where these where the petals lay, and that concerns me. I'm just going to put a bit more on that one. I like that little chubby bit sticking out there, and I want to just give that a bit of extra highlighting when I do my embossing. I'm going to move up to the next size embossing ball and just make sure, see, this big one comes down here, and then because I've only done the tip, it disappears. So I'm just going to add a bit there, bring these lines down a tad further so that I don't lose those petals. Okay. I'm still not going to remove the pencil marks on this one. I will still lose those petals if I take the pencil marks away now, and I'm concerned about that and how it will impact how the petals lay as they come closer into the centre, so I'm going to leave the pencil marks on there for now. I think, I'm going to use the hockey stick. I think this could be fun for the hockey stick to have a go. I'm going to use it on its side. shading in there. Yep. What else will I do? Because I think I like this. I want some shading to come down here on these petals. And the ones that are all sitting in front, give them just a touch. Just a touch for now. The beauty of Parchment Craft is that you can always add more embossing. I could come back to this tomorrow, look at it and think, oh, I can just tweak one or two little bits, and I can 100% do that. Nothing stopping me at all. Wouldn't be unusual to work on a large piece over a period of even weeks, potentially months. Especially if there's a lot of embossing involved, because you just can't go in and do a lot of heavy embossing in one sitting, or potentially even two sittings. It really needs that rest period between getting a lot of embossing done. So if you're looking to get some really white areas, expect it to take more than one sitting. Okay. Yeah, it's just added some of those petals in for me. I'm actually happy with that. The lines aren't putting me off, the pencil lines, so I'm going to start adding some embossing to the tips of these petals. Get that blurring, blending, I should say. Get it blending down the petals. So I'm embossing this under the assumption that the tips of these petals are catching the most sunlight, or artificial light, I assume. So the tips of the petals are catching the most light, therefore they'll be the lightest in the flower. Therefore, I'm embossing them more than further down those petals where they get to the centre. And that's what will create the depth of this flower. That's what will make it look like the petals are actually dimensional and sticking outwards and upwards, creating a bowl, as you would expect from a flower, and well, most flowers in nature anyway. Maybe not all, but certainly majority of them seem to sit there cupping the stamens in the middle. Petals come out and up, forming a little cup. I'm just going to keep going around working these petals until I'm happy with them. Needs a hockey stick. There's no point in me trying to emboss down the side of this petal using a small embossing ball. It would take a long time unnecessarily, and it would be very difficult to get a smooth texture from that. Again, it would be like using a highly sharpened colouring pencil and trying to get a smooth finish from it. It would be very difficult. And for no reason, I can just move to a larger embossing tool that will give me a smoother result in a shorter amount of time. The mat that I'm using is probably what I'd call a medium mat, nice all-purpose mat. You can certainly get mats that are little bit softer than these, but I'm probably heavy-handed, and anything too soft I'll over emboss. And you can get harder mats as well. So there are some techniques where you would definitely want to use a harder mat because the way you're working runs the risk of pushing the tool through the mat. So if you use a harder mat, that reduces the risk of that happening. So how are we going? Lovely. Nice progress. I feel like I'm at the stage now where I'm happy to take that pencil marks off. So I've just got myself a clean tissue, a little bit of cigarette lighter fluid, and off it comes, just like that. No damage to the parchment, no damaging the surface of it or anything like that, and it just evaporates away beautifully. So now all I've got left is the embossing that I've done, nothing to distract me. I've got a nice white line down here, but nothing coming off it, no embossing coming off it. Doesn't look right to me. That needs to be blended. With a hockey stick, because it's got this curve to it, when I'm using this edge here, I need this edge to be towards the edge of the area that I'm embossing, because this part here, even though you can't see that it's doing much embossing, it is definitely touching the parchment and it will emboss the parchment. So it will leave you with a fuzzy line if you've got that on the outside of the area that you're embossing. So for that reason, I'm left-handed, so I can only use it embossing a line to the right-hand side so that the tool comes back over the embossed area. Of course, when I want to do the other edge of these petals, I'll just work from the other side of the petals. That looks good. I'm going to blend this one down. It is just a little tip showing through, and same with this one. It's just a part of a petal showing through there. Blend that in a bit. All right, now what I'm going to do, as I said, because this is a hockey tool and I don't want to damage or don't want to put embossing overlapping where it shouldn't be, I'm now going to work going the other way around these petals so that the tool is always laying over the petals that I'm embossing rather than over the area where I don't want any embossing. It's always a surprise to me because we can clearly obviously see this embossing that I'm doing. But nonetheless, when I turn this over, the embossing is always whiter on the other side. I don't know why that is. Oh, that looks cute. I love that little petal that just curls around behind that one there. I'm so happy I put that on there. Right, how is it looking? Ooh, nice. See how we've got some lines on these petals, but it looks like texture. It looks like that almost veining that you get on petals. So I'm happy with that. The only one I'm not happy with is this, because it goes from quite a bright white to no embossing in a very short area, and it didn't look right. Okay, how is that? This one here needs a bit of blending. I feel it's just very white here and down to no embossing there. Don't like that. It just doesn't seem right. Doesn't seem right to me. Great. I'm happy with all of that. I'm happy with the petals, probably just not that one there. It's just here. It's going from white, 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 and then nothing. And I'd rather it to blend a little bit more. I don't want to use the hockey stick tool for that. I feel like it's a bit cumbersome for such a small amount of work in a small amount of area. Yeah, so now you can just see that petal comes along a bit more. Okay, we happy? I feel like This petal here still needs a bit more blending. It's possibly just me overthinking it. I'm sure if there's any other crafters or artists watching this, you would know exactly what I'm talking about when I say overthinking it. Right, love it, very happy with that. Needs a center in the middle. What will we do? I think I'm going to do some nice dots there, and that will give me the opportunity to actually use a heavier mat, which is what I've been talking about. Is what I was talking about earlier, is using a heavier mat, and this is a heavier mat right here. So this one that I have been using is Squishy Squish, about probably 8 to 9 millimeters thick. Squishy Squish. I'm going to put that aside. This is actually a bit of a rubber belt, I believe. Very hard, no squish in that whatsoever. The marks on it is pencil marks, because this is when I've been embossing from the back. When you do the pencil on the front, flip it over and emboss from the back, the pencil will reproduce on your mat. Doesn't bother me, doesn't affect the use. I suspect I could easily clean it off, but I haven't bothered. I am going to use this heavier mat now because I'm going to use a teeny tiny, this is my second smallest embossing tool. And I want to do some nice dots there. And as I said, I would say I probably am a bit heavy-handed, and if I tried to do this on a squishy squish mat, I suspect I would just punch holes in my parchment. All right, so I've got the idea, or I've got the space where they can be. We've got a series of them of that size. Now I'm going to move to the absolute smallest embossing ball I've got, and I'm going to do some in between, because I think it's nice to just have a bit of inconsistency. I mean, nature they wouldn't all be the same. They wouldn't be evenly spaced. Unfortunately, I have a habit of evenly spacing things like this, and then it doesn't look as natural as it should. Yeah, I like that. So we've got some different sizes. I wonder if I should do a couple of little ones here. But again, I'm probably overthinking it, as I do. Okay, cute. Happy with that. Colouring it, I feel like I want to make this orange because it's sunflowerish. I feel like orange might be the colour for this. Righto, I'm going to do Dorso for this one. I like the nice soft colouring it'll give behind it, and it'll make it pop out. So I've got my trusty orange Dorso crayon, or pastel, you might want to call it a pastel. I did used to do pastel art, so I'm probably more inclined to call them an oil pastel. And look, there's brands out there that align themselves with doing Parchment Craft. Certainly this is one of them. I also have other oil pastels that are just El Cheapos, marketed towards children, or I think I remember having them in school when I started in as a child in primary school, and you know, they do a great job as well. So I'm just blending this out with some of that lighter fluid, the same lighter fluid that I removed the pencil marks with. I am just going to get it into, once this orange crayon went into some of those embossed divots, because I'm working on the back, they're divots, I wanted to get it into all of them. So you may not necessarily see it through the embossed areas, but at the same time, I wouldn't want it to show through even a little bit in some areas and not in others. It would, you know, I just wouldn't be happy with that. I'm just getting a bit more lighter fluid on my paper towel because I just want to blend it a bit more. See how that was literally a tiny drop of that lighter fluid. It doesn't take much, it just melts this oil pastel. It doesn't bother me that I'm not coming all the way out to the edges on this, because it's going to be a going to be set into resin as a jewellery pendant, and it will be cut much smaller than the final piece of this parchment, so I'm not concerned that it'll all end up being cut off. When I flip it over, a bit of pink there, that's annoying me. Okay, there we go, gone. It's going to end up, I like making circular flowers like this into circular pendants, and so that's how that'll end up. I feel like I might add a bit more orange and really make that pop. The more colour that you put on, the more contrast there is to the white embossing, so it will make the embossing pop even more. But I certainly, you know, quite often will do just a very light tint to the back of it because it just looks so sweet. You know, if you get a pale blue or a pale pink, it's just lovely. Because as you've seen, you actually don't have to put any colour behind these at all. So long as they're not sitting on a white background, you will still see the embossing. So now that that is on a white background, you can still see the embossing because of the orange. It's just making it pop right out. When I flip it over onto a black background, the orange, you can barely see it, but you can still see the embossing. So I'm quite happy with that. It would ordinarily, you know, it does look a bit odd having a flower head just sitting there in the middle of nowhere, but because it's going to be cut to make a pendant, there would be no point in me adding a stem or any leaves because the pendant would end up quite large, and my concern is that with the flower being at the top, it would be not physically top heavy, but the picture itself would look top heavy. And how am I going to make that? My brain's thinking, how am I going to make that into a pendant? Because if it was a teardrop pendant, the pendant teardrop's going to be bigger down the bottom, but the picture would actually be tapering off just to a stem and some leaves. If it's a circle, the stem and leaves will literally just be cut off anyway. So I'm happy with that. Now, I like the embossing. I love the orange. Orange is my favourite. And now we're at the stage of the process where I choose the final shape and size of the pendant according to the design that I've embossed. This design was a nice, almost circle shape, and I had actually initially been thinking of making it a circular pendant, but after trying it with different shapes, I decided I'd prefer the contrast of it being a square. So I've cut it to the correct size and shape. You'll see I've also punched a little hole in the top there because that's where the jewellery findings will need to go through the finished pendant so that it can actually be made into a necklace. There is a technique that I sometimes use, and here it is here. So this, if you imagine this is a oval, you'll see there's a chunk missing off the top, and I've deliberately done that. So you'll see I've actually just torn it. I've hand torn it, and I end up with this nice rough jagged edge, which I do particularly like because it contrasts so nicely with the softness of the parchment and of the embossing of the picture. So that's the finished piece for that. But if you imagine, of course, that that's going to be an oval, above that tear will just be the clear resin, and that's where the hole will fall for the jewellery findings to fit into. So that's just a couple of examples of my options when I do have some finished pieces. I much prefer to wait until I've finished the designs completely so that I can have a play around and just be sure what final shape I'd like them to be. And this is the pendant fresh out of the mould. It's got, though, a rather sharp edge, so the resin curves up the silicone mould all the way around, and you end up with an uneven, quite a sharp edge. So I'll use this very fine file, and I'll file all of that resin off around the edge, get it nice and even. I do wear a dust mask when I do that because the dust that comes off, to my untrained, unscientific eye, is about as fine as talcum powder, and I'm quite sure I don't want to be breathing that in. So I'll put on a dust mask, file all that down, get it nice and even, and then I apply another layer of resin to the top to create a nice domed front surface to this pendant, and I will see you then. Here is the finished pendant. Those rough edges were filed down smooth, and then I added another layer of resin to the front surface and domed it so that it's all glossy and smooth. When we turn it around, because of the translucency of that parchment, we get an exact mirror image of that flower from behind. but of course it's a little more orange because we applied that orange Dorso crayon to the back of the parchment. You can now see it when you turn it around. The flower is still quite clear and easy to see. It's just got more orange to it than when we look at it from the front, because on the front that embossing is still nice and white, plus it's got that bit of orange behind it which pops that embossing even more. It's turned out well. I'm happy with this design. Look, if you have any questions about parchment, absolutely pop them below. I'd be more than happy to answer them for you. I look forward to doing more videos on parchment projects in the future, so stay tuned. If you've enjoyed the video, please like and subscribe. And thanks for coming with me today on this parchment pendant journey. I'll see you again in the future. Thank you.